All right, this is mostly for documentation. It's Sunday, October 30th or thereabout, 2016. And so this has got to go into chelate to get derusted. This is the emergency brake or hand brake contraption. It's known to be kind of a mess and kind of jinky. There's aftermarket replacements for it. But we're not going to worry about that because it always seemed to work before. So this is how it mounts to the cage. So this would be top on passenger side, driver's side. Some of the linkages are riveted like this one, and some of them aren't. So what I'm going to do is disassemble it as much as I can, and take the wire wheel to it, and then we'll go ahead and dunk it in. All right, just a little note to myself. This screws in to there. I backed this nut off just a hair to break the lock, and then unscrewed it out, so we can, as a starting point, we can just roll that right back. Let's see, so I decided to put the cable in the parts washer. Not sure if it got run before, but it seemed like it was maybe a little bit greasy, and I'm sure there was grease inside the hose, so I'm going to put that in before it goes in to soak. I take the, one of the things you hear about platers is that they lose small parts a lot. I've got this wire, which I suspect was from Mama for arrangements in her Christmas decorations and stuff, but tied all the small pieces together, and I'll wrap it on that so that they don't get lost. The I mean, it's 4 gallons, so it's not like a it's 21 quarts. And I took the abrasive wheel to this to try to get as much of the easily accessible rust off as possible, just because, again, the chelate is consumed by derusting, so anything we can get off beforehand. But you know, we wouldn't be able to get in between all those pieces without completely disassembling this without some kind of a liquid. Even with blasting, you know, that's going to be line of sight. So put this in. It's weird. The this big piece here that I'm holding doesn't seem to move, and I'm not sure if it's supposed to or not. There's a pin in there with a washer. The washer's on the wired up, so it seems like it should move, right? Because if they like found a way to weld that into place on the shaft, then there'd be no point in putting the washer and cotter pin underneath it, because it basically acts as a bearing for this V here that rotates. So we'll see. We'll soak it and see what happens. Ah, shit, this is upside down. Oh well. Take your Dramamine. All right, so emergency brakes. So John had a good point that I can just mark these, or he said put a wire on them, but I'll use my little punch, and this is the driver's side, so this will have 1 punch, and the passenger side will have 2 punches. I'm gonna go ahead and disassemble these. I'm gonna put them in the parts washer because they were just pulled off the car, and I suspect that there's some oils on them. Made them with a manual wire brush. How much you can disassemble these, I'm not sure. There's obviously a pin there, and there's another pin there. But I'm not sure how what that does, because this inner one doesn't move. but I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And I already put the emergency brake actuator in the key late. This is interesting. The movable piece with that pin is held on with this bolt, which is clearly bent, and I doubt that that's correct. So I'll have to add that to my list to see if they're available, otherwise I'll have to straighten it as best I can anyway. And so I'm going to take the old pads off, which obviously had almost no use, but I went ahead and replaced them because one, they were cheap, and two, this is the passenger side, they're all busted up. Alright, here is the passenger side caliper. I decided I'm not going to worry about marking them up because they're obviously directional. This is why I went ahead and replaced the pads. I suspect that you didn't get very good parking brake performance out of these, but I got some new ones, so we're good. The driver's side is in the parts washer. Didn't feel greasy or anything, but the cleaner it is, the more effective the key light will be. I, scrubbed it down as much as I could with that to get the bulk of it off. So we'll do the same thing with this. Well, this may explain why the pads were all eaten up. Springs with big cracks in them tend not to be very springy. So I'll definitely need to replace that one. I have to look at the other one now to see what it looks like. All right, so I'm gonna take the spring off the shock. They're held on with those things there, and there's a trick where you put it between the brake rotors, because the top hole of the brake rotor fits over those clips, compresses the spring, and lets it out. But it's all kind of trapezy. So what I did was got these big washers down here to take the load, and then I put some here so that it's all stable. So now I can flip it over and get the top one on. So that worked really well. It's not even taking any effort with the little ratcheting wrench to get it pushed down. So I'd call that a big win. All right, so springs off, keepers are off. The new Sachs shocks. Sachs is a division of ZF, makes the 9 and 10 speed transmissions in Europe and Germany. A lot of people talk about the bogies, BOGEs, as the good alternative, but Bogie is actually the cheap brand, the discount brand from Sachs. So I got the Sachs ones. There's 50 bucks a piece. These little covers apparently are often lost, and it goes, this is the top where the keepers keep, and then this goes down here on the bottom. So we'll clean that up and get it chelated, and it will be painted and good to go. Alright, so I got two off. One adjustment that I'm making, you probably can't see them very well, but I've drawn black Sharpie lines on the studs. Those are spread out as far as they can be so that there's clearance with the spring. But I had this one unwind, unwind from the bottom, unbeknownst to me, and so it was almost done, but it popped out at the bottom, and gave me a little surprise. No big deal. But with coiled springs, surprises are generally not a good thing. So get these last two finished up. Yeah, one other thing worth noting is that you actually don't have to wind the spring down that far, because all you're trying to do is take pressure off the keepers. And so here it seems like if you get the top of the rotor, even with the top of this flange that the keepers go under, that's enough. So that'll make it a lot faster. Just a note for reassembly, the springs have this plate welded into them, and that holds the keepers in. So the side without a plate, the raw spring end, goes on the bottom. Actually, it goes on this, like that. Doop. And then the keepers go here in this piece that's welded in. All right, so the dowel, or the threaded rod, and the brake calipers proved to be a great technique. So I will hang on to the old ones and the rods until the springs can come out of the purple power, which probably leave it in there for a couple days. And then they'll have to go into the bath. You see Derek's got to clean up his paint stuff still. Let's see, so I'm gonna go have lunch, and then I'm gonna work on this little workbench. I think it's a cheap Harbor Freight thing that I bought at some point, but the boards that they put on it are particle board, MDF, and turns out it can't support the weight of that beast. So I'm going to cut out some new boards out of 3/4 inch plywood and replace those, and that should get me several more years of use out of it. I've had it for a long time, so I'm sure I can't complain about the value for money. All right, let's review. So calipers are built, seals are still a nightmare. I haven't done the U-joints, although I have them. That's the T that splits the input line from there's a rubber connector that goes from the IRS to the long brake line that runs out of the car, and that splits off into two to feed the calipers. That was in the evaporust and came out all shiny, so I went ahead and coated in shark hide so it'll stay shiny forever. And the springs and the collars and the keepers are in the parts washer soaking. I put the keepers in there just as backup because the new sack shocks come with new keepers, but just in case we'll have those. And then the emergency brake parts. Little lizard for Andy to play with. Emergency brake parts are in the soup along with the emergency brake line, or cable. Use the cable that runs up the drive shaft tube, and that was getting a little rusty where it was exposed outside, so it's in there too. So we'll leave those probably for a couple days, and I threw the old shocks away. So now I'm going to straighten up, because we got to bring the ARC 7 in here to find out why there's a fuel leak, and then I'll build the new boards for my little workbench. All right, so that's it for the day. I made the plywood replacements Unfortunately, the only problem I really had was that the screws that were originally on it, when I tried to use them again, the head stripped. But I had other ones, so it wasn't a big deal. But you get another 10 years out of it. And then the springs are in here, degreasing and paint stripping, so I'll leave those. And then emergency brakes are in the chelate out on the front porch at 130 degrees, so I'll leave them there, and they should all be cleaned up shortly.